He never tells them who he is. He never says, I am John, the son of Zechariah, who ministers in the temple of the Lord. He never says that. He tells them over and over again, however, who he is not. I am not the Christ. I am not Elijah the prophet. And I am not even the prophet. He tells them who he is not. And just when he is about to say who he is, I am, he points back to someone else. The voice of another. One crying out in the desert, as Isaiah the prophet said. He never says who he is. He always directs it back. And I think perhaps then those scribes and those Pharisees and those Levites, they might have left that riverbank angry, frustrated, unfulfilled. What are we going to tell those who sent us here? But you see, I don't think John could have told them who he was, even if he wanted to. Because they didn't want to hear the answer. They didn't want to hear what he had to say. They didn't want to have to change their lives. They didn't want to have to hear that they needed to convert. They didn't want to hear that everything that they had been waiting for was finally to be fulfilled and they might be out of a job. They didn't want to hear that everything they'd studied perhaps now was about to come to an end. And where would they go after this? They didn't want their lives turned upside down. And so they couldn't hear who John was. Because they didn't want to hear who John was. Everyone else who came to him for baptism, they came because they were ready to convert. They came because they were ready to turn over their lives. They didn't have to ask who John was because they already knew. They were open to receiving him. The scribes and the Pharisees were closed. They could not know him. The penitent sinners were open. And so they knew who he was. And they were the ones who rejoiced. Rejoice, St. Paul says. Rejoice always, and in all circumstances, rejoice. This letter to the Thessalonians today is for us the message of the third Sunday of Advent. Be joyful. Rejoice. Be happy. God wants us to be happy. Happiness is what our goal is. And we are called to be happy, as St. Paul says, by letting the Spirit fill us. The Spirit who makes us joyful, who makes us happy. But what is that Spirit? How do we let the Spirit come into us? We have to be open. We have to be open to the Spirit to move into us. Unlike the scribes and the Pharisees, who didn't let God's Spirit in, we have to willingly choose to be happy. That's right. The only path to happiness is by our choice. Happiness is not as the pagans used to believe. It's not as even some would paint in the world today. Happiness is spinning the wheel of fortune and see where the clicker lands, or rolling the dice and seeing what our fare is. Happiness is not drawing out the lottery. Happiness is not something that is by chance, that is outside of our control. Happiness, to the contrary, is entirely in our control. We choose to be happy, or we choose to be miserable. The choice is ours. St. Paul says, test everything, discern everything, and then choose the good and eschew the evil. Choose what will make you satisfied. The Spirit of the Lord. The Spirit of love. That's what fills us with joy when we choose to love. When we choose to open up our hearts and to let our charity flow out. When we choose to open up our hearts and to receive the love that is being poured out to us. That is when we are joyful. This is why we say it is more rewarding to give than to receive. Because it is true. When the Spirit flows through us and we experience charity, we are fulfilled. We are called to love. We are called to choose to be happy. Choose it. It is quite literally that simple. And St. Paul says, choose in all things to be happy. In all circumstances, choose it. Because no one can take away your choice to be happy. They can take away your money. They can take away your possessions. They might take away your freedom. They might even take away your health and well-being. But nobody can take away your choice to say, tough, I'm going to be happy. No one can take away your choice to say, I choose to be happy despite everything else. No one can take that away. That is yours. And that is what God asks of us. Choose this. Do not let the evil one conquer you, and do not let those who are his servants conquer you. And by choosing to be happy, how we thwart all that try to tear us down. Because that is something truly that no one can take away. By letting love flow out and flow in, we will be happy. And so we look to see what prevents this joy, this happiness. And it is not the opposite, it is the opposite of love, but it's not hatred. Hatred isn't the opposite. Fear is the opposite. Fear causes us to close our hearts. Fear causes us to shut the gate and pull the shades down and lock the door. Fear keeps us from opening ourselves up because I'm afraid to show you who I am. I'm afraid that you will hurt me. I'm afraid to be naked before you. I'm afraid to give because I may have nothing. I'm afraid. And fear causes us to clamp down. The scribes and the Pharisees were afraid to lose what they had, not realizing that if they simply opened up, they would receive more. And so as we come to God's altar today, we have to ask ourselves, what do I fear? What am I afraid of in life? What causes me to lie awake at night in anxiety? What causes me to worry? What am I most afraid of losing? What are my fears? This is where temptation will gnaw at us. This is where temptation will say, quick, lock the doors. Don't give any more. Close yourself and indulge. Indulge in what the world has to give you, and that will make you happy. The tempter will say to us, the more you consume, the happier you will be. The more pleasure you experience, the happier you will be. And it's all a lie. We are called to be happy, not by closing up and taking, but by opening up and pouring out. Be happy, love, and choose it. You and I will choose whether or not we are happy in this life, and you and I will choose whether or not we will be happy in eternity. And so today, hear the letters of Paul. Rejoice! Hear John the Baptist announce the goodness that is coming. And by all means, above all and by God, choose to be happy, and you will.